Just a little bit of background on who we are, who the IICF is, and then particularly about this series, and then we'll hand over to the experts who we've got on the call today. So a little bit of background first. So the IICF, the Insurance Industry Charitable Foundation's vision is to be a catalyst for impactful charitable giving, inspiring people in our industry to make a positive difference in our local communities. So we do this in a few ways. We bring together the entire industry in leadership events such as this one. We focus on volunteering, and we also focus on grant giving to charities focused on social mobility. And by doing this, we give companies an opportunity to engage employees, amplify their community impact, access diverse talent, and ultimately create a more vibrant, inclusive industry. We've been going for just 5 years, but already we've been able to help more than 2,000 people across the country excel at school, enter meaningful employment, and make a new start in life. We've continued to make a difference during the pandemic by raising over 100k for smaller charities through an industry-wide campaign, something we're really proud of. Obviously, it's a particularly tough year for all charities, so we're glad we've been able to do our part. We do recognise that recovery from this crisis is really going to take time for everybody, but particularly the charity sector. And we're really proud to now be announcing our second campaign, the IICF UK COVID-19 Revitalising Communities Fund, focused on two things: alleviating food poverty and digital poverty. So your payment for today's webinar will allow children to continue their education online and help people of all ages to access vital community and government services. So this brings me to the webinar series. So obviously we're quite a unique nonprofit in connecting companies and insurance with charities in the local community. And so this webinar series has really been a source of pride and inspiration for the IICF. From cutting through all the digital clutter to the impacts of self-worth and the positive impact of diversity, we've had a lot of award-winning speakers on issues relevant to the industry, but also issues that we're facing as individuals on a daily basis. So this is our fourth and final instalment of Being Heard, the Many Voices of Diversity. And today we're looking at how you can build your leadership potential and advance your career. So this morning, we're going to hear from Catherine Bryant, who is a consultant and coach from the Progress Partnership. Catherine specialises in helping both individuals and businesses within the global risk and reinsurance sector to achieve maximum success. And then also joining the webinar is Caroline Bedford. Caroline runs the DXC Digital Minds programme, which helps insurance organisations understand the digital challenges and opportunities we have, and allows them to build a platform to succeed in a changing marketplace. So today, Catherine and Caroline will share ideas and insights, as well as tangible takeaways on how you can make 2021 the year your career can take off. So Catherine and Caroline, over to you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. And I hadn't appreciated that £100,000 have been raised for charities during the pandemic. So massive congratulations to the IICF, to everyone who's supported. That is amazing. And that's why Caroline and I are here today to give a little bit of insight in exchange for your very kind donations, so that, again, we can continue to support those charities at a time when they couldn't need it anymore, frankly. So thank you. It's so lovely to see you all. I'm going to share a few slides, and we're going to have a whistle-stop tour of a few topics that will help you hopefully progress in your career. The three areas that we're going to touch on today when it comes to developing your leadership potential are how we can ensure that everyone has a voice, and that includes you. So this is relevant whether you are a leader wanting to make sure all your team are able to contribute equally and valuably to the team, or whether you're somebody who wants to contribute more, hasn't quite found a way to do so yet. We're struggling to be heard, particularly in this online world. We're going to talk about the peculiarities of the world we're working in and moving potentially into a hybrid world too. We're going to talk about staying visible and raising your profile, because, again, if you are a fantastic leader and you're brilliant at what you do, we need to make sure you're visible. We need to make sure that people recognise you for that, so that you can be rewarded with those leadership opportunities that you deserve. And then, very importantly, we're going to talk about positioning for success with mentoring. That's both as a mentor and a mentee. And from that, we're going to introduce you to the incredible charity that was here particularly supporting today, called the Access Project, who will talk about an opportunity that you can take to get involved, to mentor some amazing young people going forward. So please do stick around to hear from Ruth, who's going to tell you all about the charity and the opportunity that's open to you at the end. And it will benefit you too. So we'll talk about this, a two-way thing. Mentoring is absolutely a benefit for the mentor and the mentee. We're very passionate about that. Now, if anyone has seen me present before, you may have seen this next comment, so I shall do it very, very quickly. But I ask you, and if you're happy to tell us in the chat, we're going to be using the chat quite a lot this session. We haven't been able to get the polls to work, so we're going to be doing that in the chat, and we obviously want to make this as vibrant as possible, so make sure you've got that open and share your thoughts with us, and we will make sure that they are included. But if you have seen this before, let me know. You know, I always say this, sometimes when you come to one of these things, your brain, when you hear something new, pops into an unhelpful thinking mode, and you think, oh, that suggestion won't work for me because I don't work in that kind of company, or that won't work for me because I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm this, I'm that, whatever it might be. And I just implore you to please keep an open mind today. So everything that you hear won't all work, but if you could just take 30 seconds, if that thought pops into your head and you switch it round and think to yourself, how could I make this work for me? Or when could this concept be useful? It may be that it's useful for someone else that you know, that you can support someone, or it may be that you can adapt and tweak. You're all from different roles around the industry, so there'll be different tweaks on things. So keep an open mind and stick with us, because I know there will be some nuggets in here for everybody. Now, we're talking, we mentioned in the invite, inclusive leadership and building your inclusive leadership skills. And I always like to add that word because it is so, so important. And you're probably all very familiar with why inclusivity is top of the agenda. And I know it's something that is very, very important to the IICF. And I won't bore you with all the reasons because I think people here know them. But we do know that the benefits of being in an inclusive environment, an inclusive industry, and having that inclusive leadership are for everybody. So organizations benefit in all these different ways, teams benefit with lots of different ways, better career opportunities, enhanced motivation, and leaders and individuals benefit too. So that's why, if you hear me talk about inclusive leadership a lot, that's why it's really important, because it's for everybody. And it's why PwC actually have said that it's not a soft skill to be an inclusive leader. It is a critical competitive leadership capability. And I think it's something that we all need to be thinking about, both as team members and as leaders, making sure we get the full value from everyone that we work with. Now, when it comes to being an inclusive leader, we could talk all day, and I frequently about the topic, but I want to focus just on one thing today, one area that has come up time and time again over the last 6 months, and that is making sure that everyone has a voice. So let's assume you have a fantastic team around you, which I hope you do, people with different perspectives, different views, different ways of doing things. We need to make sure they're all able to contribute. And something that seems to have been a struggle for a lot of people over the last 6 or 9 months or so has been contributing in this kind of environment. So I'd love for you to share now. I'm just going to switch pop my chat up. I'd love for you to share now and tell us, just give us a yes or a no. Have you found contributing or being heard in online or virtual meetings? This is obviously quite a big one, but your team meetings, virtual meetings that you're having with clients or whatever, more difficult than in-person meetings? How have you found it getting heard? Is it easier to get your point across, or do you sometimes struggle to know when to chip in, when to unmute, when to put your point across? Let us know whether you've found it any more difficult or in fact easier. Some people have said they found it easy. So Peter hasn't. That's excellent. Jennifer, easier on, like, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes it's easier. And oh, by the way, so one thing I meant to say, if at any point you've got anything you'd like to share but you'd like to keep it anonymous, do feel free to privately chat to me and I will happily share it without mentioning your name. And Caroline will do the same. We will keep an eye on that to make sure that everything can be contributed without you having to worry about having your name next to it if you don't want to. So sometimes more difficult. Team meetings easier, in larger meetings it can be more difficult. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Interactions feel more intentional. Interesting. Sometimes harder. Yeah, with lots of people talking, it's hard to get a word in. So if you find it more difficult, you are not alone. We have found, we surveyed a couple of hundred people over the course of the last 6 or 9 months, and 3 out of 4 said they found it a challenge to be heard online. And so one of these things is that we want to talk about is how you can make sure that you're heard and you can support others. Because if you're finding it easy to be heard, there's a good chance that 75% of your colleagues or 3 in 4 of your colleagues are struggling. So I want to share with you a few tips around making sure that everyone's voice is heard so that your team benefits from all the voices, all the ideas, all the suggestions. So, and then I'm going to come to Caroline to see how, because I know Caroline's got a big team that she makes sure are heard as well during this situation. So a few things to think about to make your meetings and any interaction, I've called it meeting, but any gathering, any situation more inclusive. And this does apply online or offline, but obviously today we're stuck in an online world for the moment. The first thing is to prepare. So make sure that if you want to contribute in a meeting, you know what you're going to do, and make sure if you're working with someone who's perhaps a bit shy, perhaps sometimes struggles to get their message across, that they are prepared. It's much easier to share something if you know what you're going to say. Now, let me know, is anyone here, let us know in the chat, or Caroline, you tell me if your answer to this as well. Have you ever been invited to a meeting and you didn't know why?
Absolutely, in the past, but no longer now.
No longer
Not anymore.
Absolutely, it happens all the time, doesn't it? We talk to people and they say, I've been invited to these meetings, but I don't know why. I don't know what I'm there for. So a top tip for you and for you to share with those that work with you, if they find themselves in that situation, is to ask. Just ask. So often we find ourselves wasting time in meetings that we didn't need to be at, or we don't know what we're there to contribute. So just ask. Just say, I'm looking forward to it. Could you let me know what you'd like me to bring so that I can best prepare? That's it. Or if you're inviting someone to a meeting, if you've ever been the culprit of just thinking, oh, Sharon will know why I've invited her, included her on this invite, make sure you let them know what you need them to do. On Tuesday, can you come ready to talk about this? That will give them the confidence to do a bit of preparation, and then they'll be much happier sharing what it is they've got to say, because they'll know rather than putting someone on the spot. Engage allies too. So if you want to share something but you perhaps lack confidence, make sure the chair knows. Say, Caroline, you're chairing a meeting on Wednesday. I'd really love to share an update on this project. Or say, Caroline, I'm not really confident speaking in this environment. Could you give this update for me? People will always do that. And be an ally for other people. If you see someone struggling, trying to say something, someone who really wants to, be that person to say, oh, I can see Azab's got something to add to this conversation. Could we hear that? Be that ally for other people too. And set people up for success. This is one of my bugbears, and Caroline and I both, I think, practice this pretty well ourselves, is don't just say, I wonder what you think, Caroline, in the middle of a big meeting, because suddenly that person is thrown. Maybe they weren't listening, they're not ready for you to come to them, and that's really kind of throwing someone under the bus. Instead, set people up for success. So say something like, I'm going to share my view on this, and then Alex, it'll be great to hear what you've got to say. Now, Alex knows we're going to come to her, she knows to prepare, and you can even, if you want to, say, let me know if you're okay to unmute at the moment, because sometimes somebody might say, oh my goodness, no, not right now, because we're in our home environments, remember, something's going on and I can't speak at the moment. Give people the chance, so set people up for success. So whether that's you wanting to be prepared or whether that's you preparing others, help people to give their best contribution.
Absolutely, and people will really respect you and see you as a leader if they see you taking the time to make them look the best they possibly can.
Exactly, these are all critical leadership skills, and we spend so much of our time in meetings, don't we? Leadership is all about people, and meetings is essentially just managing a group of people. So absolutely, this is all about positioning you as a leader as well. Make sure you enable contribution in different ways. Different people want to contribute differently, whether that's asking for opinions before the meeting, during the meeting, online. A lot of you have said it's easier. Sometimes it's easier because we can use the chat, we can use polls, we can use whiteboards, we can use all these different ways, which allows different people with different preferences in terms of communication to share their thoughts. So make sure that if you're in charge of a meeting, you enable that, or suggest it to the chair and say, we often don't hear from people in our meetings on a Wednesday. Why don't we try doing a group brainstorm next week and see if that draws out some extra information from people? Also, has anyone ever, let me know in the chat, has anyone ever been in a meeting with somebody who interrupts and somebody who you go around at the end and say, is everyone happy? And there's always that person who says, oh, I've just got one question. And everyone sort of rolls their eyes and thinks, oh, the meeting was finished. Why does that person have to ask that question? Caroline, have you ever known anyone like either of those?
I'm hoping that I am not one of those people, but maybe.
I think we all know, though I certainly know one of the questions is, but again, think about whether you're the leader of the meeting or whether you're a participant, think about embracing different people's styles. Some people need to be heard, they need to think out loud, they need to ask additional questions. Often those are the people that come up with the best responses, but often they're held back because we all do this eye roll thing and they're put off from asking the question that they need answered. So again, think about different people's styles, and it might be frustrating, but you might just find that those people come up with some of the most considered responses because they've asked that extra question. So has anyone ever heard of pluralistic ignorance? Has anyone ever heard that phrase? It's brilliant. It's one of my favourite phrases. It's the concept that we're all in a meeting and something's said that you don't understand, but no one else says anything. They will think, oh, well, everyone else understands it, so I won't ask the question because I don't want to look silly. But pluralistic ignorance is when everybody thinks the same thing. So everybody's all sitting there thinking, well, everyone else understands what's going on, so I won't be the one. But in fact, nobody understands what's going on. So if you are that person to ask a question, you are probably asking a question that's on someone else's mind. So you are a good egg. You are doing everybody a service. So don't.
Bravery. Bravery is another skill of a leader.
Bravery is
measured bravery, I think I would put that as.
Yes.
Considered bravery.
Considered bravery. Considered courage.
Mm-hmm.
Considered courage. And the last one to think about, again, when you're leading or you're part of a team, is to beware of false information. Now, particularly in this online environment, it's hard to know what's going on in people's minds. We could see somebody who's looking away like this and assume that they're doing their weekly Sainsbury's order online. We could see somebody that's looking over here and think that they're watching television over in the corner there rather than listening to what we're saying. We could see someone turn their camera off and assume that they've disengaged. It's really easy to make assumptions, but actually we don't know for sure. It could be that their camera is here and they've got a second screen over here and they're watching our slides as we speak. It could be that they're busy taking notes. So beware false information. Don't make assumptions about people, about whether they're switched on or engaged or not, because so much of what we see so little these days, we just don't know what's going on for people. So when we're thinking about being a leader, this is all about, I love the phrase, Viv Groskop, I have first heard this phrase from her. She talked about lift as you climb. So as we are succeeding and we are going through, we want to bring people with us. So if you've ever struggled with any of these things, help others to overcome them. Or if you find them easy, keep your eyes peeled for people that aren't finding some of these things so easy and support them so that all our voices are heard and we get all the added value that we want into our teams. And because we're on a very tight timescale with this webinar, I've jotted down those things that I talked about and a few extra tips and tricks for managing the virtual world and making sure all your teammates are heard. So if anyone would like a copy of that, either just private message me here or drop me an email and I'll be happy to send up that to you. And
so Catherine, talking of tips, Kieran's brought up something that's actually really relevant and is quite a tricky one in the chat. The sort of hierarchy or the etiquette of should you speak up about something if your boss hasn't? That's always a prickly one to handle.
It certainly is. What's your take on that, Caroline, before I share mine?
Well, again, I think that it is something that needs careful handling. And I think that in that kind of situation, you should potentially, the way that I would handle it is potentially reference my boss, and I would include them in my question or my response. But I appreciate, Kieran, that you've alerted us to the fact that it's not quite as straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, one of the things that I like to do is exactly that, is to, if you dying to raise something that perhaps your boss or one of your colleagues hasn't, is, as Caroline said, bring them in. So just say, actually, yeah, Caroline, my boss, and I were speaking about this just the other day, weren't we? And we thought this. So you can bring them in. So you're not sort of talking over them or talking in place of them, but you're bringing them into the conversation. And also you can always remember to use those different communication methods. So you could private message them during, saying, would you mind if I mention the project we're working on, or should I mention the project that we're working on? And they might say, actually, there's a reason I've not.
That's it, absolutely. So Kieran, you're right to be cautious, because there are often behind the scenes activity going on that you may or may not have been aware of.
Absolutely. So yeah, always consider the peculiarities of your circumstance in different meetings. In some you'll be the leader, and some you won't. There'll be different things. So yeah, absolutely. Thanks for reminding us. Of course, there's no one size fits all in anything. So definitely not when it comes to these kind of things. So yes, do let me know. A few people, lots of private messages of people, if you'd like any of those other suggestions. So they're good for you as a leader, and also good for sharing with people who perhaps have not found themselves able to share as much as they'd like in the online environment, and it can translate back to the office. When we're moving into a hybrid world, it's also going to be very, very interesting. I don't know, has anyone here ever been in one of those meetings pre-pandemic where you all sat around a table, but somebody was on the dial in the squawk box, you know, in the middle of the table, or one person is on the screen because they're calling in from home or from an overseas office?
Yes, absolutely.
And how easy was it to engage with that one person on the screen or on that call? It was tricky, wasn't it, for them to have?
I think Peter summed up probably a lot of people's experience, that in that situation, if the people on the phone are in the vast minority, they get forgotten about.
Absolutely. So again, keep these things in mind. So we're moving back to that hybrid model. It's natural, particularly because we're craving a bit of interaction, that we're going to want to talk to the people around the table with us. But make sure, if you've got people dialing in from or calling in from from other offices or from home or from wherever it might be, make sure they get equal footing too. And if you're chairing that meeting, again, it's a leadership capability to be able to bring all those people in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the reverse is true there. If you are that person on the phone, it can be quite difficult to continue to pay attention. So there are some tips and techniques to maintain focus, which is something that I've always benefited from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that is just a teeny little bit around building your leadership capability when it comes to being more inclusive. Try out some of those things. And again, it really helps to position you as a leader and somebody who brings people together, appreciates all those different perspectives. There's so much more to it, of course. And of course, when you get different perspectives, there will be some disagreement, and handling that is a skill in itself. But that is a topic for another day. So I'm going to move us on to the second thing that we promised to talk to you about now, which is around raising your profile and staying visible. Now, more important than ever is exactly this. It's not any good being brilliant. People need to know that you're brilliant. People need to know what you're doing. They need to appreciate your talents so that you can get those opportunities that you want to progress. So share in the chat. Let me know, let us know. How visible are you in your work, and has this changed since working remotely? We've had lots of people, haven't we, Caroline, talk to us about how their world has narrowed slightly, and they...
Yeah, absolutely. It's especially because in our particular sector, we're often in the city of London, in the square mile, where it's very relationship driven. So you're very used to being face to face and co-located with people. So being at the end of a screen now is we're 9 months in, so I think many of us have adapted well to it, but it was very much a learning curve to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people have said their world is narrowed. You know, they're working brilliantly with their team. That's working really, really well. But actually the wider piece, you know, bumping into people in the office, being around, being called into a meeting. Oh, as you're walking past, Peter, could we get your view on this? Or, you know, oh, Wendy, when you've got a minute, could you pop in here? It's just not happening as naturally as it does in person. And so one of the things we want to think about is, how do we make sure stay visible? So Jenny's saying, it feels like people don't have spare time to get in front of anyone. Yeah, because it all has to be, it feels structured, doesn't it? I feel like you need to book a call with someone, but actually you just want to say hello over the coffee machine.
Yeah, I like that George has said that in a government environment, maintaining that low profile is actually beneficial. It's choosing when to raise your head above the parapet, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And Kieran has made a brilliant point, which we will come on to in a second, that she's more accessible now, whereas previously would have been tied up with lunches and clients and all that kind of thing. So that's a really great point. So we've got two sides of this. We're less likely to bump into people and have those in the moment interactions, but actually the people that we might want to bump into and get visible to are probably more available, because at the moment they're not going to be on a plane or at lunch. Or, you know, in a client meeting, because they're going to be a bit more around. So you've got those to
and also more open, I'm going to say, to distraction, but more interested in doing something a little bit outside of the status quo. And possibly feeling a little lonely themselves, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. Aren't we all? Isn't it nice to talk to different people and see different faces? I think it's lovely, isn't it? We're so used to seeing our team, who we love very much, but it's lovely.
People's colour-coded bookshelves behind.
Colour-coded bookshelves. I'm going to have to change them, aren't I?
No.
I just want to share with you one stat before we I'm going to hand over to Caroline to share some of her top tips around visibility. So let me know in the chat if you've ever seen this before and if you can work this out. Now, this was a study that was done some years ago. And I share it because it's always a good one to get you to noodle on, as my friend always says. So this chap, Harvey Coleman, did a lot of research, and he surmised that there are 3 key components to career success, becoming that leader that you want to be. There's a component around your performance, your ability to do the job. There's a component around your image, so your reputation, how people think of you. And there's a component around your exposure, so who you are visible to, the exposure that you get internally and externally. Does anyone want to hazard a guess at which of those 3 you think the 60% slice is related to? Going to check. Oh, I've just got my chat's got hidden behind your lovely faces. Nolene says exposure. Any advance on Nolene's vote? Azeb's exposure. Anyone else? I think we're going to have to send out some Twixes, Caroline. I always send a Twix.
Catherine's prize of choice
is a Twix. And you're absolutely right. All 4 of you have said exposure. Yes. Now, that's not to say that your technical capability is not important, but it's a given. We assume you're going to be brilliant at what you do. It's not enough, though, to just be good. You need to have a great reputation. You need to have that great network that we've talked about. And you need to obviously have exposure to the opportunities that you want. And that's through being visible. As much as we don't like it, if nobody knows where you are, they can't reward you for it.
That's fantastic.
So, thinking about that, let's talk about how we can raise our visibility and stay in the spotlights, as it were, on an internal basis. So Caroline, talk to us about some of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. As Suzanne said earlier on the introductions, I run the Digital Minds program for DXC. I founded it for years. We're just about going into our 5th year now. It's an innovation and talent program for people within the London insurance market to get their messages across and put forward ideas and bring them to life, working collectively. And one of the key tenets of the Digital Minds program that I always share with the delegates, and it's sort of our lifeblood really, is it's really important to raise your profile in a way that you're comfortable with, in order that you have that ability to influence and achieve your goals and your desires. So being visible is something that is super important as a leader, as many of you are now, but also continuing to develop your leadership skills. So I think Catherine and I would both agree, we're both perpetual learners, and although we're leaders now, we still want to continue to develop those skills into the future. So one of the things that we look at, and I think it's even more critical now, is addressing that phrase out of sight, out of mind. And in a more virtual world, it's very easy to kind of slip into that mindset because you're in your comfort zone, really. So one of the things we want to be able to do is to look at using our position within our own organisations to build our profile. So we want to be visible in-house. Catherine, a bit Chris Whitty here. If you don't, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So many of you will be very familiar with doing this. The fact that you're on this Zoom call and there's so many video cameras on is wonderful and tells us that you are very much in that mindset. But if you want to enhance those, there are a number of opportunities to be able to be seen and connect. And each of you will have your own comfort level in order to do this. And as Catherine keeps saying, it's not one size fits all, but this is something you can hone in on yourself, but it's also something you can share with your team and the people that you support. So there's comfortable ways to do this. So for example, Sharing a business update. So if you are aware of something that's going on within your organization, maybe it is a charitable activity. So in Suzanne's case, within AXA XL, I'm sure that the £100,000 that the IICF have raised is something that absolutely you'd want to shout from the rooftops. So being the person or the vehicle to do this will help raise your profile by the mere fact that you're passing on good and interesting news. In addition, to be able to raise your profile, it's a little bit about volunteering for things, making yourself known, putting your hand up. So if there's something that you would like to become involved with, make it clear. One of the phrases that I always use within Digital Minds is, if somebody offers you an opportunity that you'd like, say yes. Don't be too shy, don't be too nervous, don't have that common fear that you haven't got 100% of the skills, but look for something that will stretch you and make it clear that you'd be happy to take that on board. Internally, we would always say as well, ask to shadow, sit in on meetings, clearly demonstrating why and what is the value to you and or your line management and your directors. It's actually a lot easier to do this now that we are working remotely, because you can be an observer without necessarily taking up a space in the meeting room or being clearly there as a non-contributory factor. So if you want to understand more about finances, if you want to learn more about profit and loss, etc., ask if you can sit in on one of those sessions, and you will find that not only does it raise your confidence and your knowledge, but it also raises your profile because you are present. We're also going to talk a little bit in a second about developing and demonstrating your expertise. So we're looking here internally. One of the things that is really a very good thing to do in terms of creating that internal profile is to be generous with sharing your knowledge and fixing things. So Catherine, you've got a great example here, I think, about stepping up to solve a problem and raising your profile.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard this story the other day from a fabulous just retired CEO of an enormous insurance business over in Canada, who's actually coming to the Insurance Breakfast Club to be one of our mentors this year. And I asked her, how did you make the step up from being a managing director of a division to the CEO of the entire unit covering Canada, all the different business units? And she said that she took on a problem that everybody said, don't touch it, that's a disaster, that project's a disaster, it's never going to go anywhere. But she said, no, I'm going to take it on, I'm going to work with it. She took it on and the project failed. It was a total flop. But the exposure that she got to the senior level of management and how she handled the project was what got her noticed and got her that tap on the shoulder to become the CEO. So never shy away, even if it looks tricky.
No, absolutely, because people will feel that you have that courage to be able to take it on and you'll stand out because of it. I completely agree. Also on our list here, share your goals and ambitions. Don't be silent. If people don't know that you're up for an opportunity or that you have aspirations, then they won't necessarily seek you out. Do not assume people will seek you out. So one of the things that I would absolutely say, both for you as moving on in the leadership world, but also as sharing with your staff and your colleagues, make sure that you encourage them to be open with you about their aspirations, so that you cannot be on somebody's radar if they don't know what goals and ambitions that you have. So I would absolutely say there's two aspects of raising a profile. We'll look at external in a second, but internally is as important because it paves the way in building your credibility.
Absolutely. And one thing to add to that bottom piece around sharing your goals and ambitions, also be ready to talk about your achievements, so what you have done. So many people a little bit reticent about talking about what they've done, and of course there's ways of doing it. Again, there's no one size fits all, but claiming ownership and making sure that people are aware the contribution that you've made is really important. This worrying statistic, I worrying, not as worrying as Chris Whitty's, fortunately, around that 46% of professionals wouldn't feel confident describing their achievements if they chanced upon their dream employer. And that's just around confidence. So one of my biggest tips is keep a note. When you do something well, when you get a thank you, when you achieve something, keep a note just for you, even if it just builds your confidence, and then it's on the tip of your tongue as well, if and when you might need to talk to your stakeholders internally or externally about what you've.
Absolutely. And what I would say there is that the line between modesty and arrogance is enormous. So find the middle point there.
It is indeed. But I also, another tip, if you're worried about looking arrogant, you're probably not, because it's the people who don't worry about it who often come off on the wrong side of that line.
You're absolutely right.
If you're conscious, you're fine. You're absolutely fine. We're going to skip over these, the ways to raise your profile externally very quickly, Caroline. I just wanted to ask you about the social media, but we'll share all of these tips with everyone as a takeaway. But very quickly, in terms of social media, because I know this is how we met, isn't it? Social media.
Yes, it is indeed. Yeah, we connected because we both use business social media to share appropriate business content, and we personalize it and we make clear our positions on things in the right way. So can you just put in the chat who has a up-to-date LinkedIn profile? Say yes or no if you have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, whilst Catherine's going, oh no, hurry up, Caroline, we're running out of time. Wonderful. And I would, if you do not have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, I would advise you to refresh it. LinkedIn has gone on, has moved on and matured enormously in the last few years. Kieran, I can understand why, if you're hiding from people. I'm going to say that's fine. Continue in that. If you are in the market, and George, if you're hiding from your government colleagues, this may not be you, but if you want to create a profile that demonstrates your achievements and your professional standing, and you're able to, for social reasons, I would absolutely advise to have your profile on LinkedIn. That is the platform that you can use to demonstrate your capability, your expertise, and to share things and build your confidence in a gradual way. So please do connect with both Catherine and myself after this session on LinkedIn, because Catherine will always say a massive phrase of Catherine, do not wait to build your network until you need it. So please do connect with us. But secondly, I would advise, if you are a leader, you should be on there. If you aspire to be a leader, be on there. And if you want to create a good, you want to model good behavior to your team, you should also be on there.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm going to skip over some of these. We'll share all these tips with you just because we want to make sure that we get onto the piece about mentoring, which is a fantastic link to our amazing charity today. But yeah, make sure that you're thinking about those things. And again, one size doesn't fit all. There may be reasons you don't want to, but think about what you want to do. Now, I just need to, I'm not the host today, so I don't get all the buttons. So I had to just skip through that slide, which is something that we can talk about another day, around visibility and value that you're adding. I want to skip on to mentoring because this is such an important topic. And if I had a penny for everybody who said to me, I need a mentor, I haven't got a mentor, then I would be a very, very rich lady. But I want to share with you a couple of thoughts around mentoring before we give you this opportunity to get involved as well with mentoring the next generation of leaders. So thinking about mentoring, it is absolutely a win-win situation. And I love this quote that the ultimate test of your knowledge is your ability to convey it to another person. Now, of course, we won't go into the semantics of what mentoring is, but essentially it's using the benefit of your experience and expertise to help someone else. Whether that's giving them some advice or whether that's just sharing some examples of things that you've done that they can perhaps learn from. It takes lots of different forms, but essentially we're just supporting others to progress. And they could be our peers, they could be more senior than us, they could be newer in the industry than us, any of the above. That's the topic of mentoring is one for a whole session, but it's all around sharing. It's that lift as you climb premise. So thinking about that, we would love to encourage you to not only learn from mentors, but to become a mentor. You will develop your leadership capabilities, whether you are mentoring or being mentored. You will learn from amazing leaders, but you will also learn a lot from giving. And again, the Access Project are going to share with you how you can do that in a second. and also share with you some skills as well. One concept that I would love to just float with you, because this is something that often people don't think about when they think, I want a mentor, but I've not been given one, or I've asked someone to be my mentor and they've said no. It's the concept of having lots of different mentors for lots of different things. And Mary Barra says it best when she talks about effective mentoring takes a network. Now, I consider I have probably 20 different mentors, lots of different people that I can learn from. And I want you to just think about this as an example. Okay, so consider Shimona. Now, Shimona is an actuary in the insurance market, and she has some pretty lofty career goals. She would like to develop her knowledge of marine treaty because she thinks that's an area that she might like to move into. She might like to move into underwriting. She would like to improve her presentation skills because she thinks she could be more influential with a bit more power and oomph behind her presentation skills. She'd also like to better understand the skills needed in her organisation to progress her career. And she would like to increase her financial acumen, that P&L knowledge that Caroline referenced earlier. Now, who do you think Shimona should ask to be her mentor? Can you think of anyone who is brilliant at all these things? I certainly can't, and nor can Shimona. So if she is looking for the perfect person who can teach her all these things, she's going to be waiting a very, very long time. So I'd like to propose a solution. Instead of waiting for one perfect person, she could engage in what I like to call mentoring moments. And she could ask people who are experts in those different things for just 10 or 15 minutes of their time to share that nugget of expertise with her, gather those nuggets together, and there she has all she needs to know. So for instance, she could ask Alice to give her some insight on how to progress within the organisation, because Alice is the head of HR. She could ask Maria if she could talk to her more about marine treaty, because she is an existing senior underwriter in that class of business. She could ask Vivek if he could spare her 15 minutes to talk through the company P&L, because she'd like to better understand. Or she could ask, she could ask the amazing Caroline Bedford how she goes about putting together a presentation and making sure it always hits the mark. So when you're thinking about, if you're thinking, I would really like to have a mentor, or I would like one of my team to have a mentor, and you're not able to secure that one person that's a perfect fit, don't worry. Think in terms of skills. Think, what does this person need to develop? What knowledge do they need? And who could I ask for those specific things? You can break it down. It gives you access to more people. It gives you access to more diversity of thought. It gives you access to different perspectives. And it's a lot easier because, Caroline, I think you've probably had these emails like I have, where someone says, "Dear Caroline, will you be my mentor? Lots of love, Steve." And you think, well, I mean, what goes through your mind when you get that sort of request?
Delete.
Yeah, not because you're not a lovely person, because I know that you are, but because you think, but I don't know what Steve wants. How can I help? Do I have time? All these questions go through your mind, and so often people will get a rejection, which is really, really hard to deal with. So instead, think about who can you ask to break it down and give you access to that diversity of thought. So it's switching things around. And with that, I am going to pass to Suzanne to give us a little introduction to the amazing Access project, where if you would like to spare some time to do some mentoring, they will be, I'm sure, delighted to have you. Suzanne, are you able to speak? Is your voice okay?
I think so. I'm going to speed through it so we can get to Ruth anyway. So you haven't got me for very long. So thanks so much, Caroline and Catherine, for some really tangible takeaways there. I'm really pleased to introduce our next speaker, who is from an organisation that the IICF have had the privilege to support. Ruth Joyce is the Senior Trusts and Foundations Officer from the Access Project. And the Access Project is focused on helping students from disadvantaged backgrounds access universities through tuition and in-school mentoring. So Ruth's just going to spend a few minutes with us now describing how the Access Project is transforming the lives of the young people they're working with, and how we can all continue to pay it forward by mentoring future leaders. So with that, Ruth, straight over to you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. You are doing much better than me. If I have a cold, I'm very, very pathetic, and I'm like, I can't speak at all, I'm just very bad. So thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Ruth, and I'm going to have Catherine going through my slides for me because she's very, very powerful. So I will be giving her a little nudge in a second. But yes, who is the Access Project? So as Suzanne said, we're a fair education charity that works with young people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds to help them access an education at a top university. So why do we do this? So one of the reasons is that you are 6 times less likely to make it to a top university if you are from a less advantaged background. So out of 100 students, only 2 will make it, which is a big problem. And a lot of it isn't to do with a lack of ambition or a lack of talent or anything like that. It's more not knowing how to navigate that pathway. It's really tough, it's really competitive. And if you're in a big class and you maybe don't have parents who can help you in the same way, and you don't have teachers who have time to give you that little bit of extra one-to-one attention to help you really push your knowledge, it just becomes so much more difficult. And the reason we are sort of aiming towards helping students into top universities is because that's where the access gap is the biggest. It's so difficult to get into those kind of top 50 universities. So Catherine, if you can get me to my next slide, lovely. So these are some of our amazing students that we work with. So they are in year 10 up to year 13 at school, and the programme is half and half really. So we've got half of it is tutoring with a volunteer tutor, and half of it is mentoring. And our mentors are TAP members of staff, and they actually work in our partner schools. And we're in 31 schools at the minute, but we hope to be growing very soon, because I think as everyone has seen during lockdown and on the sort of ongoing pandemic, that access gap and the different sorts of support that students are getting depending on where they live and the sorts of schools they're at is really different. The gap is sort of becoming worse and worse. So we're hoping to grow into more schools very soon, fingers crossed. So we've had to adapt this year. We used to have all of our support happening face to face. We had a little bit of support happening online for our students who live in the East Midlands, because it's much tougher to get around. I'm from the East Midlands, the buses are a nightmare. So that was a bit tough. But actually the fact that we had some online tutoring already happening before this year meant that when the pandemic hit us in sort of February, March, and schools started to close, we were able to switch online very quickly. So that kind of meant we were quite flexible and quite robust, which was great. So all of our tuition now happens online. Here's one of our lovely students, Callum. He's so lovely. So he's just given us a little quote here about what it means to him being on the Access Project and what his Access Project volunteer tutor has helped him achieve. And we also hear from here Stuart, who is his tutor, talking about that relationship he's built with Callum, which is really, really important. So I just want to give you guys a second to read that, because it's just really lovely. So one of the things that we would say to anyone who's thinking about, I'd really like to kind of boost my own CV, and I'd really like to become a bit more confident and maybe give back at the same time, is signing up to be a volunteer tutor with the Access Project kind of ticks a lot of those boxes. So Catherine, if you pop us onto the next slide, I've got a few bits here, which hopefully you can see. It's come out very strange there, but I'll go through these, don't worry. So being a volunteer tutor, it's an amazing opportunity to be this positive role model for a young person who could be from a very similar background to you or a very different one. So that kind of connection with somebody can be really, really important, and you wouldn't just be supporting somebody in a subject, in a particular subject, but also just sharing a little bit about your own journey, which whether you're at the beginning of your career or you're way sort of much more progressed and you're thinking, oh, I might retire soon, you will all have these amazing stories to tell. And often we find with our students, a lot of them don't know that any of your jobs exist. Just, I mean, how can you reach for something that you've never even heard of? I didn't know what my job title meant before I became it. So sort of being able to share that knowledge as well is just as important. You also can gain really valuable tutoring experience. All of our tutoring is one-to-one. all of our tutors are completely trained. We make sure everyone has everything that they need so that they're confident doing it. But it just means that that experience can be really valuable for you to be a mentor yourself in the future in work. But also if you even thought about changing a career as well, it's a great experience to be able to do it. So yes, it can enhance your CV as well, which is great. Volunteering, of course, is a great way to give back, but it makes it looks great on your CV. It's the kind of two-way street. It's really good for you to do for yourself, and is just a great thing to have there on your LinkedIn as well, because you can link to us. But also it's a really good way, particularly now because we're all online, to enhance your communication skills, your planning skills. How can you actually have a tutorial with a young person online, because it is quite different and it's a bit weird. So getting that experience and feeling more confident with it is a great way of kind of boosting your own confidence as well. On the last slide here, I've just got my contact details on here, but also the contact details for our amazing volunteering team and our website. So if you'd like to go and find out anything else about how to sign up as a volunteer tutor, we're always looking for more, because our volunteers are half of our whole programme. So do go and give us a Google or get in touch if you would like to ask any questions. That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Suzanne. I was just going to say to Ruth, it sounds great to have somebody of that age to talk to who might actually, unlike my own children, think that I have something valuable to say.
Thanks so much, Ruth. That was a great job as well in adapting your content too. So thank you for sharing that. And, you know, as I mentioned, IICF are really privileged to support the important work that you're doing. This is really about setting up young people for success from a variety of backgrounds, and that's exactly how society should be. So thank you for sharing that. So just to close, I'd like to thank today's speakers, but also Waitmans for hosting this webinar. And I'm really pleased to share with you that this webinar series alone has helped us raise almost £500 to help contribute to the two things we mentioned, the food and digital poverty, which is really great. So thank you so much for supporting today. If you haven't already done so, please, if we could ask you to donate to our campaign to help revitalise communities. We'd be really thrilled for anything you can give. You can do that on the IICF website. And of course, please contact us if you're interested in learning more about the Access project. With that, I will close the webinar. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.